I'm a daughter of immigrant parents. I'm Nigerian American, but I know why my parents came to the United States. And that economic liberation and that prosperity is something that we all desire. And so this particular conversation, I'm extremely excited to have the privilege of listening to. I first want to welcome our moderator, who is an absolute powerhouse, brilliant individual. The moderator of this particular panel today is Attorney Olivia Mungenga. Welcome. Olivia Mungenga, human rights lawyer. Olivia Mungenga is a Rwandan American human rights lawyer, genocide survivor, and passionate advocate for justice and peace. I really want to get to know you, girl. Olivia earned her law degree from Howard University and has worked with the World Bank, the Carter Center, and as a public defender serving vulnerable communities. Her inspiring story of resilience began after surviving the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis, and she has since dedicated her life to service. From mentoring youth to advancing gender equity and education in Rwanda and Ghana, Olivia's voice has reached global platforms like CNN, and she even appeared in Marvel's Black Panther. Ooh. Now, can we give it up for Attorney Olivia Mungenga? I think this kind of was nothing to play with. Okay. So now I want to welcome one of our panelists today. I am going to start with another attorney. We got attorneys over here, okay? Attorney Uzo Akpele. Attorney Uzo Akpele, an immigration lawyer for Credo Law, LLC. Attorney Uzo Akpele is a lawyer based in Atlanta, Georgia, where she practices immigration law assisting people. She's a graduate of the Faculty of Law, University of Nigeria, and the University of Georgia School of Law. A believer that no one is illegal, and also that immigration is actually a way of paying a compliment to a country. She enjoys writing and talking about U.S. immigration so that people can be properly informed about what to expect as they navigate the processes allowed by U.S. immigration law. Uzo is also knowledgeable in business law and how it intersects with immigration law. She enjoys meeting people from different countries and backgrounds and finds this enriching. And we, please welcome. I told you, it's kind of hot, it's heavy. Welcome. We have a plethora of just experience on this panel. I'm excited. Now, it's not shameless plug. I'm going to do what Representative Shaker Adeyina did. He said, it's not a shameless plug, but I run a lead hership movement. And I'm seeing all of these powerful lead hers in this room. And so I'm excited as I'm standing here. Last but not least, I want to welcome the last panelist, Bukie Faforiji, Strategic Finance and Policy Advocate. Adebukola Bukie Bajori is a civic leader, policy advocate, and former city council candidate working to ensure African immigrants are not just seen, but heard and influential in U.S. policy spaces. With over a decade of experience in strategic finance and analytics, she combines data-driven insight with a deep commitment to equity, access, and public impact. Bukie currently serves a 2-year term on the DCES Local School Council, an advisory body that connects parents, educators, and administrators to collaborate on school improvement. In this role, she acts as a liaison between school and the broader community. As a YWCA Georgia Women's Policy Institute Fellow, she played a key advocacy role in the recent successful passage of House Bill 582, Survivor Justice Act, which expanded protections for survivors of gender-based violence. Bukie brings clarity, conviction, and lived experience to every space where policy and community intersect. And we welcome Bukie. I'm excited for today. I'm going to turn it over to our lovely moderator. One more. Oh my goodness. Online. How did I forget the online person? And I forgot. Oh, I do. Okay, so another powerful woman. Okay, we got the women in the house today. We have Johanna LeBlanc, who also is an attorney. So I'm going to go back and correct myself because she's attorney Johanna LeBlanc. She is a leading expert in U.S. national security law and foreign affairs and a trusted voice on global television. She often appears on Al Jazeera, BBC, and other networks across Africa, the Middle East, and India. As partner and head of global public policy practice at Adomi Advisory Group, she advises governments, corporations, and high net worth clients on trade, critical minerals, debt financing, sanctions, diplomacy, federal legislative process, the America First doctrine, and strategic policy. She also lectures on U.S. foreign policy and the African Continental Free Trade area as an adjunct professor at Howard University. Prior to joining the firm, she served as the legislative director in Congress. Again, can we give it up for this amazing, powerful panel of brilliant leaders? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the beautiful introductions, and thank you all for being here. And also, thank you for the planners of this event. It's not easy to get something going. I had a nonprofit, it lasted about 10 months. I cannot keep begging people to come, so now I do solo nonprofit work. But so I want to give a special shout out for Namdi, Dr. Namdi and Stella, for the leadership as well as all the volunteers. Thank you for putting this together. I also want to give a special shout out for everyone who made it, whether in the room or online. It's a Saturday morning. Saturday, you could be at brunch, you could be taking a nap. So it's a blessing that you joined us today. So thanks for being here. And of course, our beautiful panelists, all of you, as well as Johanna, LeBlanc, online. So before we start this conversation, if you can indulge me, if you will. I want to take a moment of silence in honor as Africans, or all Africans or African descent, African diaspora in the room or online. I want to take a moment of silence for all ongoing genocides, for all persons that are currently displaced. We have millions displaced in Sudan, millions displaced in Congo. We have a genocide. It's a mess. So if we can take a moment, just in honor of all those who are ongoing horrors. We speak of surviving certain horrors, but some people are still going through those horrors. So if you can indulge me and take a moment of silence, thank you. Thank you so much. This conversation is going to be geared around economic opportunity for African immigrants. So we're going to speak about the intersectionality between immigration, policy, economy. In other words, how do you not stay broke? In other words, that's really the topic. How do you not stay broke in this America? That's the topic in sum. So Johanna, I'm going to start with you. If you allow me. I am a bit biased to Johanna LeBlanc because I know you have an affiliation with Howard University. I am a graduate of Howard Law. I know you didn't go to Howard Law, but you have an affiliation with Howard. So, hi, hello, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, yes. Yes, so Johanna, I know you do a lot of policy work, and I wanted to start with you. You speak a lot about the power of African diaspora shaping U.S. diplomacy. How do you see economic empowerment for immigrants connected to foreign policy or global stability? How are the two connected? If you can share a bit about that, because I know you have lengthy expertise on the matter. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations to the organizers for organizing this incredible event. And thank you to Cassandra for reaching out and asking me to be a part of this much needed dialogue. First and foremost, to respond to your question, I always say this, until the African continent takes its proper place in the world, on the world stage, people of African descent, whether you are here in the United States, in the Caribbean, in Europe, we will never be fully respected, irrespective of how much you have achieved in terms of economically, in terms of education, and otherwise. So I think it is vital for us as immigrants here in the United States to work with our friends and our colleagues and our partners on the African continent to achieve economic justice and economic empowerment. Because, and for me, one of the tools to do that is through the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is Africa's own trade agreement. It is the largest free trade area in the world, where currently 44 countries have signed onto this trade agreement, meaning that it harmonizes the trading of goods and services within the African continent. And according to the World Bank, you're talking about the possibility of increasing the collective African GDPs of African nations by more than 3.4 trillion and lifting more than 30 million people out of abject poverty. So in a time where we're seeing that more and more policies, trade policies in particular, are becoming more protectionist, and we're seeing more and more isolationist policies, whether it be here in the United States or other parts of the world, now is the time to swiftly accelerate the implementation of the AFCFTA. And I think that the African diaspora plays a vital role in that process, because again, when the African continent takes its proper place in the world stage, then us here at home domestically, we will be fully respected. So economic empowerment for immigrants is not just a domestic issue. It is a foreign policy asset, right? So when the African diaspora thrives economically, what does that mean? What does that mean? It means that we can influence how policies are shaped at the United States Congress, at the White House, at the State Department, and so on, right? So it is vital for us as a group to become more and more economically empowered. And you're talking about a group of people, right, where remittances to low and middle income countries reach nearly 685 billion in 2024, right? So that is larger than aid. That is larger than large in aid and direct foreign investments combined. And so that level of remittances have really provided stability in regions where fragility fuels conflict. So when the diaspora invests capital into the AFCFTA linked sectors, they align prosperity with peace. So in short, it is vital. We cannot negate how vitally important it is for the diaspora to be fully economically empowered in order to influence and shape policies domestically that will impact the African continent and other parts of the world where you have a great number of people of African descent. So I'll stop here for now.
Thank you so much. Brilliant insight, Johanna. In sum, if you are poor, nobody's going to listen to you, basically. So I very much believe in what you said about the African diaspora taking a stage on the international scene. And I like that you mentioned the World Bank. I know when I worked at the World Bank, the mission, I don't know if it's changed since, but the mission of the World Bank, fun fact, is meant to abolish extreme poverty by 2030 in 5 years. I don't know if that goal has been pushed back, seeing that it's coming up. But I really liked the vision, because extreme poverty is man-made. There was, according to biblical principles, there will always be poor among us, sure, but extreme poverty is man-made, and nobody, no human being should be living in abject poverty. You talked about abject poverty, and a lot of a lot of our nations, aside from the lack of economic power, aside from that, there is also a deep mental slavery that we can touch on later. But before I get too excited about this, because before I get too excited, I want to turn it on to you, Bukie. Maybe you can share a bit. Many immigrants, many of us, when we first move here, we turn to entrepreneurship, as your first path to success because the opportunities are limited. And I know you're an entrepreneur yourself, among other things. What are the top challenges, would you say, immigrants face when trying to build and scale a business? So, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about everything. Policy, the World Bank, Africa, Bob Marley. I was just quoting mental slavery from Bob Marley, and then entrepreneurship. So stay tuned. The question is, can you keep up? So that's the question. So Bukie, if you can share a bit about what are the challenges that an entrepreneur face. We've heard from the policy aspect as well as the international trade agreements that Johanna mentioned, but we also want to hear from an everyday life. What are the challenges that an entrepreneur faces, an immigrant? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. And first of all, when you talked about entrepreneurship, two things came to my head. Like, first of all, when we talk entrepreneurship, we have like two categories, right? So for some of us, we really desire to be entrepreneurs, right? So some of us probably we've run thriving businesses in our home countries. We came here, it became just, the natural transition to continue to run businesses here. And some of us, life happened to us. Some of us did not dream of becoming like entrepreneurs or be our own CEOs or whatever the case is. But along the line, you come with your degrees, your expertise, all the credentials you get here thinking, let me continue at that level, right? And there's this ugly word that we use all the time, start from scratch. But there's nothing funny or sexy about starting from scratch, right? So for some of us, we pivot, right? Some change careers, some change literally what they used to do back home, do something different. If you're lucky, and some of us are lucky, we get on that, the corporate track, climb the career ladder. And then for some of us, again, they yank that ladder off. That ladder gets yanked off from under you. And then it's now survival mode. It's now, well, I got to do something, right? And then that's where this whole, okay, I wouldn't call it, but somehow it's some form of coping mechanism, right? Where you're like, nah, I got to bet on myself, right? I've put in my all. It's not yielding the fruits I want. You know what? I can do this on my own. So people take that route and become entrepreneurs. So whether you like really invested in it, like I really want to become a business owner, or you just felt like, you know what, I'm going to bet on myself, either of the tracks is still not easy. That entry point is still very challenging. And if I was going to like summarize in like, a couple of points, I would say the three main things that I typically see are like the first one, capital. So for a lot of us, we've come from countries where, for me, for instance, we are cash driven. Everything is cash upfront. If you don't have cash, you're not getting it, whether value or services, right? So we're used to that cash economy. We come here and it's different. It's a different story. It's more credit-based, right? So imagine a business owner, someone who's desirous of having a business, and you need funding. You need loans, for instance. You want to scale your business. What do? You go to the bank. And the bank asks you, where's your credit report? Where's your credit history? You don't have all of that because, we're not used to that. We don't have that history, right? It asks you for collaterals, or do you have that kind of collateral, right? Depending on when you got into the country as well. So those are all bottlenecks that exist where you need capital, you need funding to grow that business, but you're not able to because it's not available. And the banks that are supposed to give you, you're not eligible for it because as far as you're concerned, you might default on that, right? Now, when you pivot again, so what do? You bootstrap, you begin to do things out of pocket. You start small. You start in your kitchen, you start in your garage, right? You get like some little, we have different avenues where we used to do back home, like little like contributions here and there, right? You get creative with funding your business, and it's very tough. You look at compliance too. Our American system just assumes you should know it. You should know what you're doing running a business. But the truth is, we don't always know it. In fact, a lot of times, how do you know that you don't know it? When they penalize you, when they fine you, and you're like, I got to pay that fine. Well, guess what? You learned a lesson. You'll never do it again, right? So, even just getting a business, for instance, there are a lot of intricacies, a lot of nuances to it. You're looking at the business licensing, the requirements. You're looking at tax IDs, for instance. For some of us, depending on what your status is, you may not even have a social security number. So if you really, really want to be, I want to be a business owner, you get an ITIN. But guess what? It's not even universal across the United States. Some states make it easy for you with an ITIN, run a business, pay your taxes, pay Uncle Sam his own cut. Some states, it's not as easy as that to get an ITIN and then run a business with it. And then even with you that you are paying your taxes faithfully with your ITIN, you still can't access some of these benefits when it's time, to grow your business. And then the last piece is the connections. So being a business owner, coming here with no connections, with no networks, So when I mean connections, I'm talking about ecosystem that the deals are happening, right? The contracts are flowing, they are happening, they are tapping each other into opportunities. You are on the outside and you're just peeping in like, look me, but we don't have that advantage coming in, right? So it's more of we are on the outside of that ecosystem where there's mentorship, where there's guidance, where opportunities are flowing, but we can't really access them. So what happens? We are working multiple times harder, right, to make up for that gap. We're doing that, but unfortunately, our results are not commensurate to the effort as well, right? So it's a lot of heavy lifting in the beginning. But there's one thing about us, we're Africans. That grit is inborn, right? So for a lot of us who still keep that track on, I believe it's always only a matter of time. But initially, you'd always find that capital, that compliance issue, and the connection or lack of it anyways, I would say are like main challenges that African entrepreneurs face in the United States.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. A round of applause. It deserves a round of applause. Thanks for sharing a bit about your struggles or generally what you've observed in the community. You used one of my favorite words, sexy. Yeah, a lot of, as you mentioned, a lot of these things, these efforts, the entrepreneur efforts are unsexy. You have to wake up at 4, you have to, etc. So it's very unsexy. But what's very sexy in the immigrant community, and I want us to really take a moment and applaud ourselves, is what's very sexy is the hard work we all do. I've seen a lot of immigrants in this country. Yes, let's clap. I've seen a lot of immigrants, whether my friends or myself, take all kinds of jobs. I used to do, I've done all kinds of things. I worked at Walmart, I've done Lyft, I've done Uber, I've done all kinds of things. So and I think that's the story of every immigrant. So that's very sexy to me, the hard work of immigrants that are willing to do all kinds of work, not prostitution, because we could do that. We could do that. So all kinds of honorable work, and I wanna really take a moment to applaud the immigrant unbreakable spirit.
Yeah,
put it that way.
absolutely.
Yes. Attorney Uzo, thanks for being here. I know you do a lot of work in your community as well. I see you everywhere, everywhere I go. So thank you for all your service as well. Turning it to the legal perspective. For an immigrant, for all of us immigrants who may currently lack status, who doesn't have the requisite status, because no human being is illegal, as we like to say, but who doesn't have the current status, what are the realistic pathways that person can take or strategies that can help that person build economic resilience? Because we're tired of living paycheck to paycheck. Die, work, wake up, work, die, and still broke. No. So what are the
specific, what are the advice you can give to a person who doesn't have the requisite status, but who's here? How can they make the best out of it?
Well, if you're in the US, for you to work, you have to be authorized to work somehow, maybe a US citizen, or you have a green card, which is into it is built your ability to work, authorization to work, or you have a temporary work visa, and that's how you get to work. If you're a student and you meet the requisite standards, you could work as do some part-time work, some hours. Generally, first-year students are not allowed to work. And then even for the others who want to work, they have to show need for it. Okay, so it's just a situation that one is just locked into something. What can you do? I'm a lawyer. I'm not going to ask you to break the law. People, if you don't fall into any of these categories, and unfortunately, there's really nothing you can do. That's just the truth of it. At least not legally. Okay, and I'll leave it at that. Other people who are working in a sort of a limited type of authorization things, like a student, what I would say is if you have that authorization to work, use it. And while you're using it, make a plan, because it's going to change for the better. Everybody's hopeful. And what does that plan mean? It could mean planning for how, making planning for a career path. You're going to end up, maybe I'm going to work for this person, and I'll work for that person, and then I'll work for that person. Planning out that career path as an employee, and train yourself to prepare for it. Money might be an issue for students, the ramen noodle diet. However, there's a lot of free things too. And if you ask for help, use the free things you're able to, and prepare yourself. Get ready, not just your paper degree, but skills. I understand these days, and I've come across that myself, just knowing how to do project management. That's one thing I figured out. That's in demand. I can tell you that just based off of my own office, having to plot my own workflow and try to do it, and I can't do the automations. However, if you're a student, or even if you don't have authorization to work, just slowly, a little at a time, you can start picking up skills so that when that time does come for you, if you're trying to get a job, you look interesting. You can offer something beyond just, I just came. And with my Nigerian degree, Nigeria is going to be our favorite country today, right? We're going to use it for all the examples. I just killed my Nigerian degree. While you were waiting, you've learned another skill. So you're going to be more employable, more interesting to an employer. And then if you're somebody who is more minded to become an entrepreneur, that's the time to start preparing for what your business will look like when you start working. Make a business plan. Think of what services or whatever you want to produce and deliver. Again, the very same thing, start trying to put in your operational procedures. It sounds very like, how's that going to help me? It won't help you get a job today. But one thing it's going to do for you tomorrow is once you come to that point where you're going to be able to work, you jump straight into it and you start working. And either you set up your own business or you get a job. One thing I'd like to pick up from what you just said, Bukie, is this thing of we come in, we don't have funding. We don't have anything. I can do this. I can start a business. But I don't know. I don't have the credit. What I can suggest is for those of us who've been here, we really ought to be doing more. Every day we should wake up and ask ourselves, what can I do today to help my fellow immigrants? Doesn't matter if you're from Africa, you're from the Caribbean, or wherever. What can I do? Once, about 11, 12 years ago, somebody asked me a question, and with all excuses made, I'm not trying to be racist, but he asked me, have you ever seen a Chinese person in your bank? I thought about it and I said, no. And up till tomorrow, whenever I go into my bank, I try to look for where are the Asian people here. You don't see an Asian, but they do have, they're doing business. Go to Beaufort Highway here in Atlanta, go to Pleasant Hill Road in Gwinnett County. They are doing things. They're setting up businesses because they're also setting up, they have their own banks. We should be able to have our own, I call it an immigrant-based bank. So when we go there, the consideration won't be just about your credit score. Because if you go into the smaller banks and the credit unions, you might actually be able to convince somebody, get somebody to believe in you and give you that loan that will help you jump off your business. So if you put that into a bank that is backed by your own community, that's established by your own community, now you can say, I can bring so and so, they can help me, they can maybe vouch for me. And they're just more understanding of your situation, and they can see where they have more of a vision of seeing how what you're trying to do is going to go forward and make money. So that's what I would like for us to do. So like, imagine if you came here and you think you can start a business and you're waiting for your time to come to you be authorized to work. You're making that plan. We've drawn up something on paper. You're talking to people who are minded to help you, who are here to help you, who know who understand where you're coming from. Once that time comes, you jump in there and you can start your business. So you have funding. So I think that's how that's how to prepare. Prepare yourself to be employed. Prepare yourself to start your own business. This is the hand we've been dealt as people who had to leave some place to come to another place to establish, but that's just it. That's just been the way of life. People have always been uprooting themselves to go somewhere else to establish or reestablish. So we're not doing something different, so different. And I think if planned properly, we can actually make it work.
Thank you so much for giving very, yeah. Yes. Thank you so much for for giving very practical steps on how to go about these things. We're limited when your studies, when the studies is not where it should be, you're limited, but there's still some ways to keep your head up. So thank you for sharing. I have another pro tip. Whenever you feel like you're too broke, just count in your local currency. I always count in my home currency. I'm a millionaire in Rwandan francs. It's okay, you know, it's okay. But you also mentioned the Asian community who have long been considered the model immigrants in America. But I recently read an article by The Economist, written by a friend of mine, fun fact. And she was saying how Africans are actually the new model immigrants. Yes, so because we're contributing economically, at higher levels, and we have a lot of kids, especially Nigerian women is one of the highest top. I also need to start having kids so I can contribute to to the elevation of African societies. But yeah, so we are considered, we are coming up as the new model immigrants. So yeah, fun fact. I want to bring it back to you, Johanna. On a policy perspective, this I thought was a very interesting question, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. In your view, especially as a Haitian American who has an international background, but who's also has worked with U.S. foreign policy, has worked in the U.S. So, in your view, what role does U.S. foreign policy play in creating the very conditions that force people to migrate in the first place? So I thought it's a controversial question, and I love controversial questions. So, if you can elaborate, what are your thoughts on that? What roles does U.S. foreign policy play in creating the very conditions some of us are fleeing or that cause people to migrate in the first place? Thank you.
What I think is important for the audience to understand is that migration does not occur in isolation, right? It is certainly often shaped by the complex global systems that the African continent did not create, nor did countries like Haiti create, right? But countries on the African continent, well, people from the African continent and places in Haiti must continue to navigate and bear the consequences, right? But I think it's important for us to be honest and not be disingenuous as we're having this discussion. I think that foreign policy, there are some areas where we have done some good in terms of foreign policy. When you look at the PEPFAR initiative by former president, that was initiated by former President Bush to eradicate HIV and AIDS across the African continent, has really saved millions of lives and strengthened public health systems across the African continent and other parts of the world. And so we have to be very, very honest with that, right? But at the same token, we also have to look at the role that U.S. foreign policy has played in the destabilization of countries around the world that has made it almost impossible for people to live in various countries to the point where they are taking dangerous routes to come to the U.S.-Mexico border through the Mediterranean Sea in hopes of seeking better living conditions and better economic opportunities, right? And also seeking asylum. But let's start with climate change, for example, right? So we know climate change plays a vital role in countries becoming destabilized, right? So let's look at Africa, for example. Africa contributes less than 4% of global carbon emissions, yet it bears the brunt of climate change. You look at countries like Haiti, the climate change and the various earthquakes and that the country has had to deal with, which has made it not the most attractive place to live. So folks are leaving in high numbers in search of better opportunities, right? And we have to also look at U.S. and Western-backed oil and gas investments, coupled with weak enforcement and climate finance pledges, which have left entire regions like the Sahel and the Horn of Africa struggling with drought, food insecurity, and displacements. So when we look at 2024 alone, over 33 million Africans were displaced due to climate-related disasters, according to the IOM. These are the realities, right? So when we're talking about immigration, all right, and folks coming through the U.S.-Mexico border in the context of the United States, it is very disingenuous of us to just say that these folks just want to invade our country, right? We have to look at what is the role of the U.S. foreign policy in destabilizing some of these countries to the point where people can't live. And I can tell you this, most immigrants don't want to live there, don't want to leave their homes. They would prefer to stay in their countries if only there were better economic opportunities. And then let's look at geopolitics, right? U.S. security assistance, often justified under counterterrorism, has propped up fragile regimes instead of democratic institutions. When you look at countries like Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, where U.S. trained officers have led coups, citing frustrations with Western interference and lack of economic sovereignty. In Sudan, U.S. hesitation and fragmented engagement have allowed regional actors and militias to turn the country into a humanitarian nightmare. When you look at Haiti, when you look at the United States has historically backed leaders that did not necessarily have the interest of the people at heart, but yet were put in position to promote U.S. interest in the country, which in many cases does not help to increase the country's economic conditions, but undermine the country's economic conditions, right? So people have fled to places like Brazil, the United States, and other parts of the world, which has also created what you call the brain drain in the Republic of IET. And then you look at on the economic front, right? Often U.S. and aid programs, while some of them have been ill-intentioned, often keep African nations in extractive relationships. Look at the aid programs, for example. Oftentimes, when USAID was once an institution that was doing work across the African continent, USAID was a form of soft power, right? It was created to ensure that the United States maintain its global dominance. When you think of U.S. foreign policy, always think about global dominance. That is the purpose of U.S. foreign policy. America wants to remain the superpower. And so right now you're seeing a shift in that. We're going from a unipolar world to well, some of us are saying that we're already there at a multipolar world. There are others who are competing in the field. You have China, you have Russia, and you have some other emerging powers, which puts the United States in a very compromising position. And Secretary Marco Rubio once said, it's not a matter of whether or not China will be a leader in the global sense. It's a matter of how fast it will happen. And the goal of the United States is to ensure that it slows down Russia from becoming a superpower. So we can't stop it. But I think that when you talk about the commodities, right? Oftentimes, like in 2023 alone, Africa's exports were valued at approximately 670 billion. So accounting for about 2.7% of global exports. And so we have to also think about when the African continent is trading with other countries, because when you're sending your raw materials to other parts of the world, and then you're buying it back to bring it to your people, what happens is that you rob the country and the people of the opportunity to create manufacturing jobs, right? You rob the country and the people of the opportunity to build wealth and also to create jobs, right? So these are all the different challenges on the economic front. So when we see boats capsizing in the Mediterranean Sea or Haitians arriving at the US-Mexico border, we must ask ourselves how much of this migration is a symptom of policies designed in Washington, Brussels, or Paris that have undermined sovereignty and local prosperity to the point where people cannot live in those countries and they must find their way to other parts of the world to seek better futures for themselves and their children. Because at the end of the day, everyone, irrespective of where you're from, you want to be able to provide your children and your families with a better future, period.
Wow.
Very well said. Thank you so much. And the audience agrees with me both online and here because I'm seeing a lot of hearts and claps. So thank you for sharing that. The US, I mean, it's just a reality. The US foreign policy or the US reputation internationally is not a very clean one, and that's just a reality. But as you said, there's a level of individual responsibility that African nations and individuals have to also have. You spoke on immigration. There's one of my favorite rap, actually, one of my favorite French rap. It says, "C'est vous qui avez choisi de lier votre histoire à la nôtre," which means it is you who chose to tie your history to ours. So you cannot now claim isolationism when you found us. So immigration is just a natural consequence of you intermingling with other people. Now we're here and we have to have the same rights, period, as you said, quoting your period. But I also want to touch a bit on something you shared about the brain drain. I'm seeing a lot of reverse brain drain, which basically a lot of us going back home to increase our economies, the go back to Ghana movement. Every day I scroll on IG, Alicia Keys, all these people are getting Benin nationality, Ghana nationality. So all of that is a reverse brain drain, which is contributing to the elevation of our nation. So before I get too passionate, I want to allow the audience that has been very patient. I don't know how we're doing on time, but I want to allow the audience or anyone online who may have a question for any of our wonderful panelists to feel free to ask the question. I don't want to monopolize the Okay, thank you. Maybe you can choose, depending on how we're doing on time. Yeah, thank you.
So this question is from Tiffany online. It says, how can we work with licensing boards, employers, and educational institutions to create more inclusive pathways for skilled immigrants? And it's not directed towards anyone, so anyone who feels like they can speak to that, please.
Yeah, sure. So what I think is, first and foremost, we need to define what exactly the gap is. Once we identify where the gap is, and then we begin to work with our representatives, our senators. So everything starts with policies, right? And before you can land on which policies do we need to effectively push, we first need to understand where the gaps are, right? So for instance, what I've found out, especially for our experiences as immigrants in the United States, is so a lot of times our credentials are not even recognized. So you have to go back and reinvest if you want to have even like a fraction of a future that you desire to have, right? So a lot of us go back to school or recertify, do one form of one thing or the other, right? But you find out that even infrastructures or institutions that support this for immigrants are not really there, right? So I know there are organizations, for instance, where if you come in with a foreign degree, you can, and you're trying to go back to school, say for your master's degree, they will like convert your GP or something, your transcript, they'll convert it somehow so that it's in the US format. Why can't we have the same for our degrees? Why can't we have a version of, well, I have a 20 year, 15 year, whatever that, year experience is in this industry? Why can't I have that translated? And if I have to cover any gap, well, this is the program that has been set up to help me convert that experience and then plug me back into the system. Why do I have to be underemployed because it's not available, right? Why do I have to do menial jobs just to kind of find my footing while I figure out, okay, am I going to do a separate degree? What is my next step in the United States? So it's not so much what we want to do is, do we have the power to do it? As individuals, we don't have the power, but what do we have? We have the voice to speak up. So if we all have individual, this is what we're going through experiences, our life experiences, the next thing is coming together to share those experiences. Then we see similarities in our stories, and then you're like, wow, this is an actual issue. This is not just Bukie. This is not just, Olivia. This is literally something that is a big gap, a huge gap in the community. Then we can package this up to our reps, to our state senates, to our city councils, right? To say, hey, this is backed by data. This is facts. There is a gap here. There is a need here. We need policies that would help us, take away and alleviate this gap, right? So I think it's both on us and it's on our elected officials. It's a two-way street. For us to speak up when we identify gaps, have that collective voice and then march together, right, to our elected officials who can do something about those gaps. And the more of us who are also in that position to help us work on those policies, the better. So like Senator Rep Adeyina said, let's keep showing up everywhere. Show up with your voice, show up to run for office, just show up in one form or the other.
Thank you for that response. And thank you, Tiffany, for such a great question, because policy is just an example of policy shapes everything. So get involved, get involved, get involved.
I'd like to add a bit to that. I think just why does that gap exist? Because when you come here to the US, people come from everywhere. There's people who speak different languages. We're not even talking about the Spanish, French part. We're talking about our own native languages. There's lots of people coming from different parts of the world, different languages, different educational systems, and just different educational standards. So I guess America wants a standardization. And let's be sure what you're bringing is up to what we want. And I wouldn't call it a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. However, math, it's math. 1 + 1 in English is the same as 1 + 1 in French or in Igbo, anything. So I think, well, so the thing we need to do is also just to enlighten, like you just said, Bukie, talking to our representatives changes things up. And just the more we interact with our members of society, our fellow citizens, I think they begin to understand. It might not even be your representative you're talking to. It might could be your neighbor. And sometimes you're finding out you're talking to somebody who lives on the street with you. He may be a doctor, US born, US trained, but he just doesn't understand that medicine is the same everywhere. Personally, when I came to the US, I dealt with you went to law, you're a lawyer from Nigeria. Gee, the law must be way different. And I said, no, it's the same British common law. It's just, it's a little bit more on steroids here in the US. And well, back then, when I first came, you couldn't even take the Georgia bar exam without having an ABA, American Bar Association recognized degree. I tried to, you could only do it in only 2 states were accepting of those, California and New York. And then I said, okay, well, maybe I'll just do the New York bar and I'll see if they'll waive me into Georgia using their reciprocity rules. Turns out that Georgia didn't have reciprocity rules. So I just did the African thing. I went back to law school. I got a JD degree, which is exactly the same thing as an LLB. Contracts, torts, constitutional law, property law, criminal procedure, the very same thing. So fast forwarding to 25 years post-graduation, it's just been the same thing. The only thing I have different is, well, I went to school older again. I had the opportunity to be a grown person going to school. It did something for me. I have US classmates. I have US professors. So there's something I gained. But these days, up to 5 years ago, Georgia has changed. You can now come in. Now they're recognizing foreign degrees. The UGA Law School where I went to, they have a program for foreign trained lawyers. You can take it, and then the Bar Association, the Georgia Supreme Court will allow you to take the bar exam, and you can now practice as a lawyer licensed in Georgia. Also, I noticed that for those who just got the New York bar or something, they can even waive into Georgia. They have an attenuated bar exam to take. They take it, and if you pass it, if you're successful, you can practice. So some of these things is just, the more we talk, the more we reach out to our reps, the more we just interact with society. And I think internet too, people are beginning to see beyond their towns, their homes, and you can see what other people are doing, learn. Time will surely make this thing better.
Thank you so much. I definitely believe that Africa is the future, and its children, us, are the future as well. Especially as Johanna mentioned, climate change is affecting at intense numbers the Sahel region. I was just in Mali, and I saw with my own eyes how breathing the air is becoming difficult. So, so what you were saying about there's still hope despite all these issues. There's still hope. I don't know if maybe we should continue a bit here or do online. Okay. And Bukie, you spoke about civic engagement. I want to implore everyone, civic engagement is not just voting, guys. Please, we have candidates we've been calling. I called myself 100 people. Please, we need help. So we have a lot of African candidates right now in Georgia that are running. So if you want to volunteer to phone bank or sign wave, all those things, please reach out to us. Should we do questions online or?
I want to turn it over to the floor because we're inclusive in this room.
Okay.
And so I do want to turn it over to those that are here. Basically, are there any questions that you have for our amazing, brilliant panelists? You guys don't disappoint me. I gave you the room, I gave you the floor. Okay, not a problem. So I will turn it back over. Yes, we have a question. Thank you for representing for us.
Thank you guys so much for shedding light on the different aspects of, education and also how we can be involved as, young adults and also immigrants. And I know the disconnect with coming into another country when you're from an African country, because I was born in South Africa, I grew up in South Africa, went to boarding school in Nigeria. When I came here, I already did WAEC in Nigeria. When I came here, I couldn't enter university because they were like, you didn't take the SAT, and they had to transcribe my WAEC results from, I'm like, it's the same thing. It's in English. It's not in Yoruba or anything. So I'm confused. Why do I have to transcribe it into the university system here? So it was such a huge issue. The only solution they gave me was to go back to school, go back and try and do 11th grade and 12th grade and then do the SAT or go take the GED. And that's the thing, that's the disconnect there, where I have a lot of friends that come here. If you don't get a scholarship from Nigeria and you just come here and you're like, okay, well, now how am I supposed to start university? It becomes so difficult. So I know with your experience, you said you came from a different country, you had to also go back to school. But now with things being different now, what would you advise people that are already in, African countries that are transitioning here? How can they better get integrated into the systems here?
I think quickly one thing before we let Uzo, because you've had some experience with the going back to school, which is such an insult because hello, I've already been to school. But one quick thing I want to answer to that is gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is a big problem in our community because, for example, when I first came here, I grew up speaking French in my native tongue, Kinyarwanda. Or I should have said Kinyarwanda and then French. Colonialism. So when I came, I was as clueless as you were mentioning. Nobody told me about community colleges. Nobody told us, for example, that if you're an RA, a resident assistant, then you get to live on campus for free. So there's a lot of gatekeeping in our communities, a bit like how women do it, old women do it to young women in terms of marriage, like, cook and clean by force because me too, I did it. I see that a lot in the workplace or in our communities, like you can go and suffer because me too had to suffer, as opposed to we need to really not gatekeep and share these resources and share our tips and the way we were able to achieve these things, because you don't have to repeat school. You can go to a community college. You don't have to take the SAT. The community colleges don't require SAT, all those things, but you won't know if you're randomly coming from Rwanda yesterday. So gatekeeping, I think, is a big piece, and I'm gonna let our panelists share more.
So let me repeat the question so I can get it correct. You want to know how to bridge that gap. What should a person do in order to fit into the educational system requirements? That's just like Olivia said, the community college is it's a thing. Don't look down on it. When you go to the community college, the standards are different. I have a shareholder, one of my shareholders, who decided they were too lazy to take the SAT. I think it was laziness. So, said shareholder is in community college. Is going to graduate with an AB in the summer and just transition to downtown. So that's being smart. And I hear I know for a fact it saves money too. Okay, and so eventually it's not where you're coming from, it's where you're at. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing is, well, if you're, again, sometimes you just have to, you're already here, you kind of started going down one path. You may want to just kind of, make that path work for you. Get your transcript, arrange for your transcript to come, okay? And it will be evaluated. In my case, community college wouldn't have helped me. However, I had my my university degree evaluated. So when I was going to, so they just used my Nigerian university degree, my LLB, as my undergraduate degree. So see if you can get them to look at it. And I would say this too, that evaluation doesn't totally discredit your bachelor's degree, really, okay? So I ended up having my LLB used as my undergraduate degree. Then I got a JD on top of it, but I cleared up one of my professors. He says the JD is exactly the same as an LLB. Go figure. So you can prepare a little. I don't know. I'm just trying to quickly think for somebody who is if besides the community college option, what else could a person do? It's just crazy having to go back and do 11th grade and 12th grade. Surely that puts a person back. Really, I think that community college thing is the way to go. Don't look down on it. They are quite good too, and the attention you get there can be quite personalized because they are smaller, and then it might even suit you better. As people, it suits their temperament better. You're in a smaller place. Start out in a smaller place. You end up, then you go do your complete your 4 year and get your BS or BA, and then you go from there. You can even go to a big name school eventually, and it lets you actually build up your GPA, which is all important. At the time you're graduating, it's just you do it easy. Everything just is done easier, and I would really suggest that for somebody. Yeah, if you are at that level of starting college. If you are at a bachelor's degree, get them to really evaluate, and you can talk to the evaluators and see if you can, your transcript, what it looks like is going to help. But in the end, like I said, 1+1 in English is same as ufu, ufu no ufu, ibua nibo. Do, do. So that's what it is.
Thank you. Thank you for these questions and thank you for these responses. I just keep hearing the words social entrepreneur and the correlation with policy because we're asking these tough questions and we all know that entrepreneurs figure out tough solutions. So I am thinking there's going to be a lot of entrepreneurs after this conference and after these panels because there's such great questions. I think we have another one from the room here that will probably lead to a business.
Can I add a quick tip on really quickly, one sentence, sorry about that. I just remembered because I never knew about this until I started working, but you can also get your loans forgiven if you work in public service for 10 years. And 10 years is not that long. Like I've been doing it for 5 years, so it's half. So public service, although a lot of things are changing now, given, cough, I'll stay neutral, but loan forgiveness for public service is a thing, so look it up. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for all of the value that's been shared. I have a question around just one of the conversations you raised earlier. Attorney, you were talking about how when you see a Chinese in your regular banks, you won't find them because they have infrastructure in place already that caters to, and even from their governments, supporting what them here intentionally. So with people, one of the things I have experienced as someone who is an entrepreneur building a business here and also a community builder as well is getting our people to coalesce around raising funds or throwing capital behind something. We would rather take resources and have a good time. Versus, and so I think my question is around how do we start shifting that culture? Most of the running a nonprofit, for example, most of the funding organizations, there's not as many minority-owned funders, grants that support initiatives like this one. You have to go to tourists and all of this, and it's a big pool. And I think just in the sentiment of creating our own tables, why can't we have foundations that are geared towards African initiatives here that are not Tony Lumelu Foundation that's back home, right? I think we can if we decide to pull together. we'll be announcing a partnership next year that's aligned around these lines. But how do we start shifting that culture? How do we start changing the mindsets of people to have it? I can talk all day around this because I've had so many conversations. I was talking to someone I consider like an elder brother, and I told him because it's part of like an organization and they spend money. Like I see the parties and like, give me some of this thing, I would do a lot of good. Like I would change this, I will make a difference. Like Namdi, it's not going to happen. How do we start doing this? And maybe Johanna can speak to this as well a little bit. Maybe if it works differently in in your culture that versus maybe that African people just will like a good time versus maybe we suffer too much and we feel like we've earned the money, so we need to what do we need to start doing differently to start shifting that culture to where we can start pulling resources together, we can start building our own microfinancing, of sorts, that accommodates, okay, you've been a business owner for 20 years from your country. That should count for something if you want to start a business here. You get the question. That's how do we start shifting to that culture?
Sure.
Oh, wow, thank you, Namdi. Johanna, please go for it. Yes, thank you.
So one of the work that our firm does is we also support investors in securing debt financing for projects in emerging markets. So we position our clients to successfully secure financing before institutions like Afri-Exim IFC, as well as the U.S. Development Finance Corporation. But to answer to your question specifically, the World Bank estimates that, and I said this earlier in my introduction, that remittances from us, the diaspora, to the African continent in 2024 was at 685 billion. Okay, that is significant. A lot of it is more so emotional giving, right? We send money to our parents, our friends, our relatives, to send children to school, to buy groceries, for a host of things, right? But how about if we turn that into, and I said earlier, that amount of money that we send in remittances to these African nations is more in FDIs. That is huge, right? So how about we create some kind of investment fund, right? And let's be strategic in terms of how we use our money. Yes, I understand the emotional giving. We can't stop that, right? When our aunties, our friends send us a WhatsApp message and saying, "Hey, I need some money to send, this person to school, pay for school fees, or whatever the case may be." Our hearts, because we're givers. Africans, we're givers. We will give to our families. And you look at some of the numbers, even during COVID, when a lot of us were significantly impacted by the global shutdown, right? But yet we were still sending money back home in large numbers, right? Which tells us we are givers, right? So what we have to do is we have to be more strategic in terms of how we spend our money, right? Perhaps we can create some kind of diaspora fund, right? I mean, we can do it perhaps in collaboration with institutions like Afri-Exim, so that when people in our community need to borrow money, right, to do business, whether it be on the African continent or right here domestically, that we can pull money from that, right? And then we can be able to have access to capital. Because one of the greatest challenges that I've learned is that access to capital is there's capital there, right? But a lot of times getting small businesses ready to get access to that capital is very difficult, because in many cases, there's an equity portion, right? Like institutions like Afri-Exim will only provide roughly 40 to 60% of the loan. And the rest of it, you have to have equity from your shareholders, maybe even from your personal money, and so on. So if we're more strategic and come together as a people, we have the money. We have the money. It shows, but we have to be more strategic in the use of our remittances. So one of the things that we can do is diaspora savings mobilization. So establish partnerships with banks and fintech platforms to allow diaspora members to allocate a percentage of remittances to investment accounts within the ADIF. And then we can also introduce invest as you remit options, right? Where senders can automatically direct a portion of each transfer to vetted projects or pooled projects. And then we can also have what you call impact-driven deployment, where we allocate remittance-linked investments into SMEs, agro-processing, infrastructure, renewable energy, digital renovation, and women-led enterprises, and also create guaranteed and co-financing mechanisms with institutions, again, such as Afri-Exim Bank and African Finance Development Institution, to also de-risk investments. And then we also need to incentivize those framework, right? So we will work through Congress, right, to offer tax incentives through bilateral arrangements with host countries and so on. And also provide diaspora bonds and fixed return instruments that convert savings into scalable capital investments. And also certainly promote equity ownership in African enterprises to foster a culture of shared prosperity. So as a law firm, these are some of the things that we've been championing on the African continent and even through Congress to put in place because we have realized the immense challenges that exist when SMEs are trying to secure debt financing for their projects. But I think that through our resources at the diaspora, we have it. Again, in 2024, we sent $685 billion, roughly $680 billion back to African nations. That is significant. So we need to be more strategic in how we use our dollars, and so that all of us can continue to prosper and engage in business that will continue to strengthen our communities, us individually, and ultimately the African continent. But if anybody's interested in this, certainly feel free to reach out, because it is something that our firm is actively working on to see it come into fruition. So.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for Johanna. Thank you so much. And I believe they're going to share your contact later, because you've dropped a lot of gems. I have a finance bachelor's in finance, but I'm a bit lost at some of the terms. I'm like, I need to go and reshape my finance background. So I'm sure you can, a lot of people can learn from you. And I want, yes.
Namdi, you talked about you see us partying and you wish you could just have some of that money, you would do so much with it. One thing I would like us to do beyond, because when we come here, I call it the Okeke and Sons mentality. You have a company, it's just you and your wife and your children are the shareholders. Supposing that we started pooling resources. Mr. Okeke, Mr. Debola, Mr. Susu, we put our money together and make that business. We can fund ourselves that way, instead of Mr. Okeke just having that African store, so to speak. He could have it could be a pool of investors, and the pool could actually be opened up some more. So that, and when we're doing that, we're now presuming that we're going to go by the rules of corporate governance. There's transparency in how the companies run, and also in the buying of shares, securities regulation. So we can do that here, so that some of the money we were going to use to party, we could actually use it to pull together and start a business or lend somebody some money. Because there's really nothing stopping us from having a group of private investors. We can do that. I think that's an instead of just go, even before we get to the African People's Bank here, we can have a group of investors. And of course, that means that when you get that loan for your business from that group, you're going to open up your books. You have to keep your finances transparent so they can get a window into what you're doing. And then again, about the bank thing, I'm going to say this, there's a lot of us. There's a good number of us here who are doing well. Since the 70s, Nigerians have been here going to medical school, working as doctors, or just coming in training, getting their residency, working as doctors in this Atlanta. Chances are that whenever you go to a hospital, I'm thinking it's like 1 out of 5, you're going to be treated by a Nigerian doctor. The person who cares for you is some African. Your nurse is an African of African extraction. And we have some money. These are professions which we know pay. The truth, that's the truth of it. So these are the people we need to start reaching back out into the community. We even have people who have now worked for so long, they've started to retire. So they have some money, we reach out to them and start as an aim and, start getting them. We have to have the entrepreneurship mindset. Let's just, Bukie is a thing, that there's strength in numbers. No longer Mr. Ikotuenya. My apologies.
I just wanted to put on my finance hat real quick on this and kind of give you like I wouldn't say devil's advocate view, but like the other side of it. So I might be thinking, what's my return on investment? Right? So if you want me to invest in you, right, then I'm thinking, what does this do for me? Right? And so I'm posing this back to you, like, how is your messaging? Right? Because sometimes things might get lost in translation, right? You might mean all the good in the world, but ultimately to them it's not coming across as, well, what do I gain from this? Right? So I think sometimes we just need to kind of reevaluate, like, okay, how are we pushing across our value proposition? Right? How is that messaging landing? Right? And is it landing creatively in a way that will get us money out of their pockets into our pockets? My pastor used to make this example. He would say, there's money in the house. The only problem is in your pockets, right? So how can we get the money out of your pockets into, right, the church coffers? And it's the same mentality, like she said, about pooling, right? But before you can pull, it needs to go from X to Y, right? But the ultimate thing that would make it go is if there's that conviction, like, okay, I support what this organization is about. I support what their values are. I support what they're trying to do, right? So it's just a little call out to, kind of say, let's also dig in, like, okay, are we testing how our messaging is landing? Let's not just assume, oh, we sound good, we look good, right? Oh, we think we're tight with everything. It might not be. We might just have to keep reiterating and retesting, like, okay, this is not working. We're not getting the kind of results we want. Let's recalibrate, right? And ultimately, hopefully, we can get that mindset shift where, like she said, there's money in the community, but people now understand why that money needs to pull together to start helping organizations like this.
Thank you. I knew that question was going to go to entrepreneurship solutions and then all sorts of other things. Fabulous. I am going to challenge you, Namdi. I like to leave challenges, okay? I'm going to ask that you do a round table. It's one thing to have the dialogue. We know the dialogue is needed, but the intentional action post-conversation, I think, is what's missing. And so if you can, and speed, we know entrepreneurship, speed is important. It's how you get the money. So if you can host a post roundtable, and for anyone who's interested in the question that you raised, because I can see we could probably spend another 45 minutes on this discussion alone. I see the way people are upset that we can't ask any more questions. So if you can do a roundtable, I think that would be wonderful, and we can start to actually solution. And perhaps there's a business that comes from it that's collective, or a fund or something. But it starts with intentional action. It starts with what was it? Get involved. And so this is one way to get involved. And then the Advocacy Academy is coming in January, which I'm sure there'll be ways that to continue to train people how to get to solutions that ultimately advance policies and get us the money in the pocket. Thank you. I think we're gonna be
Yes,
going on break soon, but I'll pass it on over back to you,
Yeah, thank you
Olivia.
so much. Thank you so much. I just wanted to take a moment to tell the people on the chat that we're going to make an effort to answer the questions via chat, I think. So don't you worry. We will answer all your questions. And I want to thank one more time our panelists for their time, our fabulous panelists. Johanna, LeBlanc, Bukie, and Attorney Uzo. Thank you all, very brilliant women. This feels like a women-led association that you were just talking about. So thank you for the allies as well. But yeah, thank you everyone for your time and one love. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so